we are going to get going on this. And again, thanks for everyone for logging in, especially on a nice sunny day. I appreciate that, and hopefully you get something out of it. So what we're going to talk about tonight is we're on our 4-part construction series. We're finalizing your budget and contract negotiation or contractor negotiation. This is probably one of the most important things that you guys can pick up in the next one of these webinars, because it's all about saving money and really keeping control on these contractors as they work on our projects. For people that didn't come to the last webinar, just a quick background of who I am. My name is James Dainard. I've been a real estate investor and a broker since 2006. I have personally flipped over 500 homes in Kings, Pierce, and Stonewall County with my business partner, Will Heaton, for the last 12 years. And as a real estate brokerage, what we specialize in is working with investors, finding and sourcing them discounted real estate product, anywhere from fix and flip to buy and hold, and teaching investors how to kind of leverage correctly to maximize their profit. So as a brokerage, we've helped investors design and sell over 1,300 flip properties since 2010. So we are a pretty high volume brokerage that does a lot of business with investors, and we are here to help. And so that's our whole purpose of these webinars, just to kind of give free education for everybody, kind of teach you what we've done over the last 1,300 homes. So what we covered last week in part 1 was, and if you guys need to, you can go to theheatanddainard.com and download the blog or the webinar in our blog forum if you want to recap, and it's free downloadable. You can download it anytime. But what we covered in this is we talked about what to look for on my initial walkthroughs, and then how I evaluate those kind of findings. And then really what we focused on last week too was just prepping to get ready to bid the project with the contractor. I think this is a big mistake a lot of investors do, is they don't get prepared and be really solid with a really good game plan before they actually meet the contractor there, and they depend too much on the contractor's game plan. So we're going to talk about that in this presentation next. And then what we're gonna do the webinar, which is about 30 minutes, and then we're gonna open it up for free for question and answers. You guys can actually type in your questions throughout the presentation. So if you have questions throughout, just go ahead and start typing them in, and then we'll get to the questions afterwards and answer those for about 30 minutes. So what you're gonna learn today is talking about considerations for finalizing your budget. So, originally when you walk the property, what we talked about last week is walking the property and coming up with an initial budget. And then after you walk it, you want to really finalize your project. And then how to hire your contractor and bidding the project, and my little secret tricks and trips that I use on these contractors to keep my budgets in control. The contracts and forms that I use, I'm a firm believer of putting a construction contract on every project. It really outlines the process for the contractor and what the ramifications are if they don't do what they promised to do. And then again, we're going to have question and answer following. So to get this kind of jumped off and going, where we start before we meet our contractor is really digging in and finalizing your budget. So the first thing that I do after I walk the property is I revisit all my comparable properties. And that's going to tell me what my spec allowances need to be. This is I think this is something that gets overlooked quite a bit in the investment community recently. I think with the market as hot as it's been, a lot of people are kind of under the presumptions of just make the property really nice, and then people will pay you a premium. That has definitely been the case the last couple of years. But as we kind of enter in a more stabilized market, it's really important that when we purchase these properties, that you stick to the game plan, and the game plan should be based off the comparable data upgrades. We'll talk about this next on a little bit more as an example on the next slide. But besides establishing your allowances, like digging into the comparables and really finding out what materials and design have gone into that comparable, you need to make sure that you establish all your install rates. So for any project that I buy or I'm looking at doing, I know exactly what my trades are installing things for. The reason I need to know that is because that's going to give my variance on my budgets and my overages at a very minimal amount. The more I have my install rates established, the less change orders in overages I'm going to have. And the other part that I always make sure I do before we finalize our budget is really review the scope of work. Again, we dig really into the comparables. What did they have that our property doesn't have? What do we need to install? What colors they're using? What kind of cabinets they're using? What kind of appliances? All these things can change your budget amount from anywhere between 25 to 5% on the changing. So there can be a big variance on that based on your comparable data. Again, you don't want to pick these homes and design them the way that you want. This is not your personal home. How you come up with your game plan, or at least how I come up with my game plan, is what do my sales data tell me? I can like white cabinets and I can like granite countertops or quartz countertops, but if all my comparables have brown cabinets and cheaper cabinets, I'm going to go with that range because that's what the market is telling me to do. And one tip that I really want to kind of push in there is make sure, again, we talked about this in the very beginning, always make sure that you build your budget before meeting your contractor. If you're not prepared, they're going to see that and they're going to try to get more money out of you. So the more prepared you are, it's just like writing an offer on a property. If I come in and I'm writing one and my offer is very solid with very tight contingencies or no contingencies, the broker and the seller on the other side are going to know that I'm for real because I'm prepared and I can come in with a solid closing. Contractors are no different. If you come with a solid budget and a prepared game plan, they'll work with you on that game plan. So again, it's very, very important that you start establishing these install rates in your spec allowances before you meet the contractor there. So how I kind of established my specs is, this is an example we kind of wanted to show you guys, is as I'm looking through my comparable properties, this could be 3 different types of kitchens that are inside of a property. Now, obviously, the one on the very right is a very nice kitchen. We can all see that. And the one on the left is a, toned down kitchen. So as I'm going through my budget, I'm looking at all the comparables. So I may like the kitchen on the right, and I think that will sell, and it will be awesome, and everyone will love it. But if all the comparables are of the picture on the left, which are the gray painted cabinets, then I need to make sure I stick to that game plan. There's buyers right now in this market are not going to pay me a premium because I make it nicer. They're going to pay you what the value of the property is. So, if we look at these 3 examples, like the one on the left is a very cleaned up basic kitchen. It was this is a kitchen that we did where we pulled off the countertops, we painted all the cabinets for $1,200. We installed new countertops for $2,500, new sinks, new hardware, and put in some new fresh appliances. This kitchen only cost me $4,000. So if I'm targeting this kitchen, this is how I budget it. The one in the middle is a new kitchen, which can be installed for about $6,500 with our vendors. Which that's going to give me white shaker cabinets, granite countertops, and a full tile backsplash. As you can see between the 2 kitchens right there, one has a 4-inch backsplash and one has a tile backsplash. That's $1,000 difference right there in my cost. So if all my comparables don't have a backsplash, I'm not going to spend the extra $1,000, even though I may want to because it might look a little bit nicer. Again, I really want to stress that stick to what the comparable data is telling you. And if I'm comping a house and it has a custom kitchen like the one on the right, I need to prepare and budget for that. Just because, and I think this is another big deal that I coach a lot of brokers on, investors on, is really when you're digging into these comparables, look into what the materials and who remodeled the property, because a lot of times, custom kitchen like the one on the right, or, homes that have been renovated by homeowners, they just have different quality items that a lot of fix and flippers put in. So just make sure that you're matching all your materials and upgrades. Don't overspend, just overspend, or don't underspend, because buyers are going to notice that right now and they're not going to pay you for it. So, but just make sure you really dig into the differences in your budgets. So here's an example of how we prepare for our contractors. So for here, these are actually my pricing off of what I pay for tile. So if you look at this, I can see that this tells me my scope, what bathrooms that I'm tiling. So I have my tile floor. I want 12 by 24 dark gray. So I already know exactly what tile that I want to put in the house, where I'm getting it from, what the name is. And then I know that bathroom is roughly it could be a 5x10 bathroom. Most bathrooms are 5x9, 5x8, or 5x10. So a 5x10, I have 50 square feet. So I know that my measurements are correct. And I also know that the tile that I really like that I want in there costs $2.60 per square foot. The other thing that I always know is that tile rates, I paid my tile guys $7 per square foot to install. That's a pretty standard rate across the board. So no matter what, I know that this bathroom tile should only cost me $480. So what that does when I'm meeting contractors on site is that I'm prepared with all my numbers, and as we're going through the scope, I can verify those numbers with them on their install rates, considering I'm telling them where to get the materials from. So the more prepared you are, the more it's going to give you to negotiate the contractor. So if they tell me, hey, to do a bath or the tile floor is going to cost you $750, which, it's only a couple $100 difference, but that's actually a 50% increase on this one specific bathroom, that I can come back and negotiate them with logic, not just say that's not in my budget. Negotiating contractors does not mean you just say my budget is this. That's not negotiation. That's just you giving them all the beans up front, right? So what you want to do is when you go through, or at least what I do, is everything's logically out. So as I'm walking through the scope, I get them to agree with me of, hey, this costs about $7 per square foot to install, right? Yes. Okay. Well, here's my budget at $480 for the tile. So you can kind of get them to agree off the install rates instead. So that's why it's so fundamentally important to get your budget put together. If you buy a property through Dainard, you actually get this for free with every property. That doesn't mean that this hits your exact budget, but it gives you a very good statistical, historical overview of what things should cost. We always encourage all of our investors to review those budgets and make any changes that for the trades that they're associated with. A lot of our investors have cheaper trades or more expensive trades. So you just need to adjust it with the trades that you work with. So now that I'm fully prepared, I know what I want to do to the property, what kind of materials, and what it costs to install them all. I need to hire my contractor to facilitate the process through. So one thing that I always make sure before I hire a contractor, and you guys, this is really, again, fundamentally important. There's been a lot of bad people in the real estate market right now kind of taking advantage of investors. They take their down payments, they do bad work, they disappear. So really, you guys want to protect yourselves. And, myself, I get ripped off by contractors at least $50,000 a year. But, we also do about 100 projects a year. So at grand scheme of things, it's not that bad is how I look at it. But how I keep this, how I prevent the losses is you want to always verify their license and bond. Also, verify their license date. If it's a fresh new license date, but they say they've been doing this for 10 years, there's probably something wrong with their other licenses. They could have some claims. They could have got suspended. Just make sure that they have an established license date or explain why their date's so new. Minimum, get 2 quotes. If you're, I always get 2 quotes because I want to negotiate. If I have a budget of $100,000, my goal is to get it done for 85, not 100. So the more quotes I get, the more leverage I have to kind of negotiate people. And references. References are probably the most key thing that I check out because people are people and they're going to tell you your honest opinion. And, try to get as many references as they can. One way that you can do this as well is you can actually track the contractor's permits through some websites. If they don't have very many references, you can actually track it through their license and then pull up the addresses and kind of get references that way. Sometimes it's best to find people that they've worked for that they're not giving you as a reference. So I like to kind of dig a little bit deeper. And then also before hiring any contractor, guys, make sure you get your W-9 signed because it makes it very hard to, you got to write off their bills and you got to you want to avoid your taxes. So make sure you get your W-9s because you may hire them and not use them again because something can happen. If you don't have that W-9, it makes it really hard to get that stuff written off or, your accountant's not going to be happy with you. So as I reference my contractor, so I've gotten my budget put together. I know my install rates. I know my specs. I've verified my contractors. Then we go to meet them on site to bid it. Okay. So before I bid or I meet a contractor on site, I make sure I have 3 things that are important. My budget, which we just talked about, a spec sheet with all my allowances on there. And then also I make sure to have at least a sketch of a floor plan. the reason you want to sketch up a floor plan is because you want to direct the contractor on where to lay the house out. The reason that is because contractors won't always come up with the most cost-effective ways of designing a house. And so you really want to be the ones in charge of designing where your bathrooms go, where your HVAC goes, because depending on where you put things can substantially affect your budget. For all of our clients, all of our listing brokers are trained to kind of help clients with floor plans. And so, for me, it actually is really easy. I just send my own brokers out to my sites and they help me with the floor plan. So just make sure you have your floor plan. If you buy a property through us, bring it in. We'll help you design your floor plan in a very cost-effective way. So again, you guys, one thing I really want to stress is the more prepared you come, the less variance you're going to have in your budget. As an investor, it is up to you to execute your budget, so be prepared. So probably the most important thing that we wanted to share today are just some tips and tricks that I use pretty much daily to get my budgets under control or to keep guys moving forward. So my first major tip, which we just kind of referenced on, is contractors should never design the house. Because the reason that's a tip is if you're asking them to design your floor plan, again, they're not going to design it in a cost-effective way. It's kind of like when I have an architect design a house for us, is we don't put them in control. We want to make sure they're doing all builder friendly framing, builder friendly window costs. We don't want a crazy window schedule. So we actually have to kind of dictate how the house is going to be built to the architect. So we can build it for a cost-effective way. So we have to do the exact same thing with the contractor. I don't let them come up with a plan. I tell them the plan. So my favorite trick that I use to get in for keeping pricing down is my jam-in method. So what I like to do is I have my full budget, and as I'm walking through the project with my contractor, I'm purposely leading off certain things. So, for example, if I'm looking at the roof and the fascia boards, the roof could be bad, the fascia boards could be bad. So I'll have my contractor bid those two items, but then I might leave some of the soffits off because soffits can be rather cheap if you're just buying them with cement board. And I won't have them bid it. So what that does, even though it's in my original budget and my original scope of work, contractors, like anything, are going to come in with me over budget on their first go around. They are always going to quote it higher than I want them to. The reason being is they're a business. They are trying to make money just like us. So what I've learned over the years is negotiating money with a contractor can be harder than negotiating the scope of work. So a lot of times I'll leave maybe soffits, which could be like $1,100 item or a $900 item on my budget off their scope of work. And so if they come back at a higher price, let's say they're coming back 10% high for that scope of work that I gave them, I can keep these items that were already in my budget and jam those into their price. And what I've found is that will save me typically 10 to 15% of my cost. So I always leave about 10% off of very basic, easy things that they can usually manually do themselves, and it costs them very little to install it. So while they're focused on their big picture lump sum bid, I'm focused on all of the scope of work. So always leave a little bit of stuff off, knowing that it's inside your budget. It's not in the budget that you gave to them. So if they come in high at 10%, you're still achieving your same goal of getting your scope of work done for the same price. It's really just kind of smoke and mirrors. It's an easy way to get extra work put in. The other thing that I love to say to people, we get calls every day that they open up a wall and there's some rot, or there's some termite damage, or there's some water leak, or there's something going on in the walls. So the first thing that I like to do is find out what's going on. If I don't know what's going on or I haven't dealt with it before, I research it. So I'll Google it. I go on forums. I talk to other real estate people. I call my real estate broker. We work with our construction department. We're researching all these things, and then I schedule a time immediately to go meet them at site. So because I've done my research, I know exactly how to fix the problem. Again, if you have questions on how to fix the problem, that's where, you can reach out to your Heat and Dainard broker, call them, and we will come up with a game plan for you. But the first thing that I always say, the house could be falling over, and I'll go meet the contractor site, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's not that big of a deal, right? Because if the contractor sees that I think it's a big deal, they're going to think it's a big deal, and then they're going to charge me a lot. So, usually, like an example that just happened, I was at a property of ours in Central District. When we demoed the wall, we figured out that the previous homeowner had taken out 2 major support beams that were holding up the stairs. The contractor called us, said it was a very, it's a big deal. There's no structural integrity in the building, and that we need to come out and look at it right away. So what I did is I got pictures, I looked at it, and what I figured out was there's 2 footings underneath just based on pictures, and I researched how big those posts should be, which should be 6 by 6 posts, and the footings are already set. The cost of those posts are $200. The install should be $200. So the big deal that the contractor was making it out to be ended up costing me $580. Whereas if I wouldn't have gone and done my research, I guarantee you my quote would have been more around $2,000. So you guys, these contractors are trying to make money just like us. They're always going to try to push for it. But the more prepared I am to give them a solution, again, I was prepared. I knew what the fix was. I knew how much the materials would cost. And then basically I was just negotiating how long it would take them at that point. But they agreed to this cheap number because as far as I was concerned, it just wasn't a big deal. So the more prepared you are, the less big deal they are. So again, use that all the time. Never act like anything is a big deal to them. And then also never ask the contractor for a price prior to doing research. Say, hey, if you want to open a wall, know what wall you're opening and what kind of framing you need to do, or ask a professional that can kind of coach you through that. If I know what it's going to be to open a wall, if I'm looking at a house and I want to open up my kitchen, I know that I need to put in, it could be a 20-foot glue lam beam, and that beam costs, $600. Depending on the size, it could be $600 to $800 depending on the size and the span. So if I know what the cost of the materials is, that allows me to dictate what that should cost. So, I would talk to the contractor and say, hey, instead of asking them how much it would be to open the wall, I would tell them, like, hey, I want to open this wall. That should be about $1,000, right? Because the beam costs $600 and you're going to charge me about $400 to put the beam in. And they might say, well, it's more bigger deal than that. Like, oh, well, I forgot. Yeah, you got to put in 2 4x4 posts. Those are a couple $100 too. So it's $800 or $1,200 rather than $1,000. So, but as long as you know your numbers, they can't take advantage of you. So again, know your numbers, call people call professionals, network with investors. I guarantee you everybody's had the same issue. I've had so many issues over the last 10 years that I have been through most of them. We can explain them pretty well. So, but again, don't let your contractor tell you how much it will cost. Tell them and then see if they're in your number. So after those few tips and tricks, and you guys, I have a ton more. So if you're a client, they're all free. Make sure to come check us out at our cash flow class. But the next little tip and trick that we're going to talk about is my bundle method. Okay. So what I've experienced over the last 3 years, we've kind of gone through a construction change over the last 3 years. 3 years ago, I was a firm believer that you need to hire a general contractor on every house. As a smart investor, you want to maximize your time, and to hire a general to run the whole project, the cost of hiring a general always made it worth it because it freed up enough time to keep working on projects. What has happened though in the last 18 months or so, contractors have gotten so busy that they'll commit to a job, but then they overcommit and they can't get to the jobs fast enough, and it screws up my schedule. Not only that, those same contractors who are picking up too many jobs only have so many vendors and subcontractors, so they are waiting on their own subs, which again will back up your project. So what I have now started doing over the last 8 months is I kind of micro general, or I call it more macro general my projects. I bundle up the sections. So what I do is after my budget is complete, I actually will section it out depending on what trades I know I have available at the time. Okay, so I'll show you how I do that in the next slide. So what this does is I will go through and bundle certain sections. So I might have a demo and a framer and a window and a citer, and he does all that work for me. And then the next guy may do the electrical, the plumbing, and the framing. So what this does, though, is this gives me more flexibility to go, hey, well, I have one guy that only has a 3-week project for doing the demo, the siding, and the windows. so I can get him in and I know he can start right away, or I can get quotes from 3 guys and find out who can start right away and who's the least busy. In the meantime, as that person's going, I have my other subs start going through. So what this does is it allows me to control my own schedule. I dictate when these guys are showing up, not them dictating it to me based on their sub schedule. Because if their subs are too busy, I need to find my own that can get it done. Because, every day that goes by costs money. And, at the end of the day, it's all about making money. And you have to be able to, the schedule alone can kill the profit. You can buy a house right, you can get it done for budget, but it can take way too long and you'll make no money. So don't let this contractor keep you hostage with their schedule. The other thing I like about this is it reduces my contractor exposure. A lot of these guys want 25 to 50% down. So instead of giving a guy, let's say my total budget is $100,000, instead of giving him a 25% down or 25 grand check down, what I've done is I've shrunk his scope of work to 30 grand. And now what I'm doing is I'm giving him a check down for 8,000 rather than 25. So, because nothing is worse than giving a guy a big down payment and then all of a sudden he gets busy or disappears, because then you as an investor are in a bad position and you have no more negotiating power. So this bundle method works really well for me. It controls my schedules and my contractor exposure quite a bit. So how I do this bundle method is, here's one example of how I do it. So there's a house that we just started in Seattle, and how I've kind of scheduled this one out is I had one crew, my framer guys. He did all my demo, my framing, my windows, my siding, and my decks. Okay. So then he comes in, he's working on this project for 4 weeks. I gave, instead of our total budget on this property was $150,000, his scope of work was $36,000. So my cash out of pocket to this contractor right now is $12,000 rather than giving them a lump sum down of about $35,000. So my exposure is very little at the time. In the meantime, this same contractor who is ready to go, he really doesn't have separate trades to plug in, or it's going to take him a lot longer to get that stuff done. I do have these separate trades, so I'm going to plug those guys in as this guy's doing all the work in a 4-week period. So this alone is going to probably pick up 2 weeks of my own schedule, because this guy was able to start demoing within 4 days of me purchasing the property. So after that guy's done with his work, or he's starting his work, what I'm doing is I'm getting separate trade bids on electrical, plumbing, drainage, and insulation. Based on my as-built, I can have those 4 tradesmen go in and bid those right off my plans with what's going on at the site. There's no reason I need a general contractor to bring these people in unless their subs are cheaper than mine, because that does happen from time to time. But if their subs are not cheaper than mine and I'm paying them a 10% markup, not only am I paying them more, they're not giving me any benefit for not having a cheaper sub, and they're going to take longer. It's just not a viable option for me to do. So what I do is I plug in those separate trades myself. Or if one of my other generals, some of my other general crews, if they're available on their schedules, they can they'll do my electrical and plumbing at the same time. After the separate trades are in, I have another crew come in and they do all my dry work, millwork, exterior, interior paint. Okay, what I have found over the years is the good painters, not the bottom of the barrel cheap painters, but usually your average to good painters, are pretty good drywallers and mud and tape and texture guys. So what I have found is that's knocked down my budget by about 10%, because they get the option to get a little bit more scope of work. In addition to what it does is it prevents me from other problems. A lot of times I hear, the house will be drywall, the millwork's in, and the painter paints, and we go in it and it doesn't look very good. And I got a painter blaming the millwork guy, and the millwork guy's blaming the painter, and the drywall guy, or the painter's blaming the drywall guy, and they're blaming the millwork guy. So you get a bunch of pointy fingers. So what I like to do is have one sub do it all, and they can knock it all at one time. And if the quality doesn't look good, there's nobody to blame. And then my other bundle that I do is kitchen cabinets, millwork, and something got messed up right there. Kitchen cabinets and finish work. And then the other trades I bring in are my general finish items and landscaping. So for my whole project, it's $150,000. I am bringing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 subs only. And what this does is it actually reduces my time frame by about 4 to 5 weeks. I mean, so not only am I reducing my exposure, things are getting done faster, and I can control everything about it. And I only have to call 9 people, which isn't too bad. So after I get done sectioning out my budget, I've got my specs, I got my game plan, I've verified my contractor, I'm having my contractor bid it with all my little bundle methods. I schedule my project out, and then I start hiring people. When you start hiring people, this is where you have to have contracts and forms. I've seen countless amounts of investor projects where I look at their contractor bid, and it's a very vague, open-ended estimate with a lot of change orders that are, they're just begging for change orders. It could just be install kitchen cabinets, $9,000, but they don't have what kind of cabinets, what kind of countertops, what kind of door handles. So just make sure your bid is very, very, it's a fixed bid, not time and materials, or not an estimate. And then also make sure there's a very clear scope of work on there. If you do a very thorough walkthrough with your contractor, the contractor should give you a very thorough bid. So after they complete their bid, it's mandatory that any trade or any general, they must sign a construction contract with me. And one thing, we do have an example of my construction contract that we're going to load in as it's actually in your free supplement, so you can download it right now if you like, to kind of take a look. It is a sample contract. If you want the real one, you got to become a client. So if you are a client, we can fire those off to you right away, or call your listing broker and they'll get you all the contracts. But what the contract does is it sets the timelines in the process for how you expect that guy to work on your project. Whether it's, hey, we expect you to be done in 12 weeks with a penalty in there if you're late past 12 weeks, or if there's a change order or time change, then how they handle that. I hear a lot of contractors after the fact, well, we've done with the project and they're, 5 weeks late. They'll say, well, the permits took a little bit longer. That's a valid point. So what my contract says is it gives them specific instructions of how we handle that as a team. They need to give me a written email telling me how long that has affected the schedule. Then they won't be penalized. If they don't do that, they don't get the benefit. So, it's just very important that you put a contract together that establishes all these processes. Again, fixed bids, like we just talked about, everything needs to be fixed, no time and materials, guys. Or you can do a piecemeal rate. A lot of times for my finish work, instead of paying guys by the bid, I just pay them by the item. Every door handle, I pay a guy $10. Every light fixture, I pay a guy $50. Every, doorbell, they get paid $25 on. So as long as I know those costs, then I can kind of keep my bid fixed or keep that, and they know exactly how much they're making. And then also the last thing, guys, because this affected me about 3 years ago, tax included on your bid is not a valid point. You have to have tax included in your bid. If the IRS audits you or them and it says tax included and there's not a tax listed on there, you can be liable for that tax amount. I had to pay about $27,000 in taxes from one vendor because it said tax included and it wasn't broken out. So again, make sure your sales tax is in there. So what we are wrapping up now. Hopefully you guys got something out of our tips and tricks. Again, you guys, if you have any questions with your projects or concerns or need some advice, please reach out to your listing broker and get a hold of them. We're here to help. The best way for us to help is for us to know about it, though. So please get a hold of us, and we will make sure we do that. So now what we're going to do is we are going to take 30 minutes of questions from everybody. So what you want to do is just type in your questions in the box right there. And as you ask your questions, I will be answering them. Feel free to ask any question you want as long as it's appropriate, and I will get the answer to them. Don't be shy. Ask as many questions as you want. So one of our clients asked, what do we do about overages from a contract when you're finished with a project and they're ready to put a property on the market? So that's a very good question. Hi, Eva. Eva's one of my longtime clients. So what I do about overages from a contractor when they're finished is, my rule is they need to submit me with a written quote or an estimate prior to doing the work. And in our construction contracts, it says the same thing, that if they don't give us a written quote prior to doing that, we do not approve the change order. So, depending on the relationship that you have with the contractor or not, it's you kind of enforce that contract at your own accord. This question actually it's perfect timing. So recently I hired a foundation company to install a driveway in our property in Shoreline. It was a very big project. The driveway actually ended up costing $22,000 because we had to build it all up, put rebar in, put retaining walls in. So what happened is the company, who was a very established foundation company, came back and asked us for $5,000 more today. And they say, sorry, we gave you a fixed bid, but we way underbid this. We need $5,000 more. Now, what had happened prior to this, and this is what's important about the process, is I originally got one quote from him, and it was $19,000. Then he said it was kind of vague. He says depending on engineering. So then I hired an engineer and a designer to design the whole thing for him. I gave it to him. I said, hey, I want to verify this is a fixed bid at $19,000 based on these specs. He changed his quote to $22,500, so he adjusted it up $3,000. At that point, he has had all the information that he needs. No scope of work has been changed, and he didn't prepare correctly. So when he called for the $5,000, I reminded him of that process, and he agreed with me that yes, he asked me to do him a favor, which I'm trying to work out with him. And that's another important point, guys. Try to work with your vendors. If they're good vendors, try to work with them. But you got to establish this your process so they don't continue to do this. But I told him no because he had all the information, all the engineering, everything up front. He raised his price to accommodate for that, and he that's his own business fault to not adjust for it prior to. Which honestly, he agreed to it, and now we're going to work it out in a different way. So just try to get in writing and get the clear scope of work over to him. A very clear scope of work will reduce overages. We have another question. And that's a good question. Again, guys, feel free to ask as many as you want. Dale, hey Dale, do you have a general contractor's license to flip a property in Washington State? So Dale, I will not answer any legal questions because I'm not supposed to, but what I can tell you is if you go to heatanddainard.com, there is a link to the flipper WAC code, and that will explain it all to you. But from my perception, and my understanding, and I'm not an attorney, so I tell people to always verify this as an attorney, is how the law was actually changed 3 years ago, or it was about 2 to 3 years ago, to where, or the law was originally started about 8 years ago, and that's where you had to have that contractor's license. Now, they made an amendment about 3 years ago saying if you hire one general to do every piece of your scope of work, you do not need that license. But that they have to do everything from demo to your punch out, ordering your appliances, everything. If you plug in any separate vendors or subs, you are making yourself a general contractor and you do need a license. That's as far as I understand it. Personally, I'm a professional investor, so I just have my license in general because the cost isn't that much, and I just like to be covered in general. And also when you're selling a property, buyers on the other side kind of like that, because they think that you taking the time to kind of get your paperwork together. Good question. So Leica, hi Leica, asks a question. It says, what is the best recourse you can get your money back from a contractor who didn't perform the work he promised and now won't return your call? You're not alone on that. That happened to me time and time over again. So the best recourse you can do, guys, is have a very good, solid construction contract. If you do not have a construction contract, it makes it very hard to enforce those. The other thing you want to do is, you guys, once a contractor disappears and you're trying to get your money back, the first thing you want to do is go down and document your site. Take as many pictures of that poor workmanship as possible. Bonds won't cover you if it's theft. If they just take your down payment and leave, that's not covered. They won't pay out on that. But what they will pay for is neglect and poor workmanship. So a lot of times, which has happened to me, I'll give a guy a check for $20,000, They go in, they demo, they start putting in some windows, they do a little bit of framing, then they disappear. So what I document is the non-finished items, like the windows may not all the way be done. They might not be installed correctly. The framing might not be done right. The demo might not be complete. And I document that. And then I have to use their fixed bid, which is itemized out, and come up with a number based on that. So from there, what I do for a contractor that didn't return one of my calls is we actually filed a lawsuit against him and his bond. And what that ended up costing me was I found an attorney that would do it all on percentage. So they usually take about 40% of the take back. But what they do is they file the lawsuit, they show up. Most of the time, these contractors don't show up because they're not responsible. They already kind of stole your money and they left. So if they don't show up, what happens is you can get a summary judgment against that contractor. So that if they don't show up, the judge will issue you a summary judgment for your amount. Then from that summary judgment, you bring it to their bonding company, and they're going to pay out on that. Now, with bonding companies, typically their bond is $12,000 to $15,000, and it's handled in the claims in the claim order. So if there's a plumber that made a claim for $5,000 before you, they're going to be in front of you. So always try to get your claim in first. But what you have is you have a summary judgment. You get the bond. The bond's going to pay you a certain amount of that. And then from that summary judgment, what I've done is I just give it over to a collections company and just give it to them to kind of collect on it. Worst case, you don't see the money, but those people won't be able to open another business. And if they do want to open a business, they're going to have to pay you. So I would say most likely you're not getting your money back, but you can at least cause a little bit of damage, get some of it back. Another thing, the recourse with guy, now if they're not returning your call, there's not much you can do. But what I try to do before I fire contractors, I try to get them to do some certain items that I know will cost me a little bit more to bring them in. So if I gave them $20,000 and they've only done $8,000 worth of work, and I want to fire them because they're slowing them down, I still might have them do, like, if they have 75% of the windows, I'll say I try to get them to get all the windows done and get that one specific specific schedule item handled, and then at least can get them off and then worry about the money later. Because a lot of times if you fire a contractor too early and you have to have someone come in and fix everything of theirs, it costs a substantial amount more. So it's really about timing on when you get rid of them. But that's unfortunate. It's hard to get the money out of the guys. A lot of times they just don't have the money. So again, have your contract. The contract can be kind of threatening too. So a lot of contractors, just based on that promise, in a contract will actually kind of perform a little better. So we have another question. It says, with contractors being so busy, I'm trying to get to it. There we go. With contractors being so busy, how do you get folks to come out and bidding for small guys like me? Honestly, small guys like you usually will get guys to come out a little bit faster than the big guys, because the big guys, they think, have lots of projects and they're not as worried about it. But what I would say is, with contractors busy, guys, that you have to, before you buy a property, you got to make sure you have a bench full of subs. There's no reason anybody should just jump into a rehab project without having a bench full of subs or resources. Again, at Heat and Dana, we can refer you as many as we can. But the best thing to do is network with investors, and then also that bundle method that I had talked about for a while, that helps dramatically, because contractors, they're busy, but if they have smaller scopes of work, they can jump on it a lot faster. Or they may be busy, but the projects that they have busy right now could be in drywall and they have all their subs working there at the time, and they can come over and do my demo and framing. So the bundle method will help that out tremendously. And then, work with your real estate professionals. If you need referrals, call them, talk to them, and they can help you bid that as well. Leica asked, can I share my attorney's contact info? Leica, I will email that directly to you. So, yes. And they're pretty good. They got me a $350,000 summary judgment. So I've received $12,000 of that, but I got $350,000 in debt that's owed to me, I guess. Hey, Nick Martin, thank you for he said something very nice, said this is a great webinar. Nick, just these are going to be every 2 weeks, every Tuesday. at 6 o'clock. This will go for a 4-part series on construction. And then we're going to take a break on the holidays for a month just to let people do that. And then we'll restart again. And then that's going to be about long-term wealth. And then we're going to do a series on leverage and how to maximize your returns. And then we're going to come back to construction or any other field that people are maybe having issues with. But yes, just for all of our clients, it's a very big priority for me this year to kind of get out free education and to really make sure that you guys are getting as much help as you need. So these will be ongoing. All right. Any more questions from anybody? You can ask away. It can be some random question about your project right now. I'm here to answer questions. All right. So we got a question from Tiffany. What is the typical markup for general contractors to charge for putting subcontractor in place as opposed to investor doing the legwork? So I would say a typical markup for most generals is 10%. For obviously flipper contractors, a lot of guys right now, because the market, they're trying to charge 15% or so, or depending on who you call, they can charge anywhere up to 15 to 20%. What like I had talked about earlier, for me, I try to handle the bigger subs myself because I have good, dependable guys, or, pretty dependable guys, not always. But some of our generals, like I have a couple generals that may have cheap plumbers that are cheaper than my plumber. So we have them bid that. I'm totally fine paying his 10% markup because at the end of the day, it's either at the same budget as mine and I don't need to manage the person, or it's cheaper. So it really comes down to my budget number and then what my trades are. But I would say most generals are charging 10%. I'm pretty comfortable paying a guy 10%, or 10 to 15%, as long as it makes my project go quicker, and it allows me to free up some of my time. If it's costing me more and I'm paying them 10%, then I need to get to work and call the subs myself. Very good question, though. Any more questions, guys? It could be anything. You could have a pothole. You got some weird things that you need to go over. I've probably seen it all for the most part. Oh, David, good question. Do you put contingencies in a budget for unforeseen things such as French drains? Typically, each investor is different. Most of the time my goal, so for example, like our budget sheet, our design and budget sheet that we actually put out for all our clients, I typically can get those done for about 10% cheaper than what we put out on the budget sheet. That's usually more about, that's just me doing the bundling and kind of moving guys around and not letting generals some things right now. But what I would say on the contingency is for yourself, if you think it depends on your risk level. If it's a really good deal and you just want to move forward, you just throw a bigger budget, then you can go for it. But I always think it's a good idea. Investors should always throw a contingency on. Usually I'll throw, depending on the size of the project, if it's $150,000, above $100,000, throw a 5% contingency on it. Or if it's a smaller one, throw a 10% contingency on it. But, it really comes down to what you want to expose your risk to be. But, you can't go wrong with throwing a contingency on. The only thing is you might talk yourself out of a good deal, but it will keep it safe. So Dale asked, how's the rental market right now? We're not talking about rentals right now, but rental market's doing well. We've actually been leasing up everything. We have about 150 doors in Seattle that we have them all fully leased. That's been going really strong for us. Rents still rising in Tacoma and in Snohomish County. Seattle's kind of flat and lining out, but it's all leasing. And then there's some really big businesses coming into Bellevue right now. So the rents in Kirkland, Redmond, and Bellevue all should be going up. And Dale, I like it. Yes, I did say random. You can ask me any question. My eyes are green and blue and whatever you want to ask. So another question, is there a possible GC make money by hiring an overpriced contractor and take incentives from them? If this possible GC make money by hiring an overpriced contractor and take incentive from them, I'm not really following I got you. So what you're saying is, I think the question you asked, and if you can clarify this, that'd be great. I think your question is it possible for a general contractor to make money by hiring higher subs and then charging you for them? Yes. General contractors can do anything that they want as long as it's within their scope of work and their contractual agreement. So what I would say is, if you use a construction contract and you're working off fixed bids, they can't change it on you. So they can hire whoever they want, but you're paying them what you've agreed to pay them. So what I would say is, you really want a really good construction contract so that you don't allow them to do that. But as far as I'm concerned, general can hire the most expensive trades there are and be way over budget on these things, or they can hire whoever they want as long as they're working inside my budget timelines. Like I asked the question, how much does a seismic retro cost on an average 2,000 square foot house? So seismic retrofit. So you guys, what a seismic retrofit is in the city of Seattle. We have a lot of old homes, and right now they're doing something called a phase 2 streamline review. And there's basically 3 permit reviews on there. One is for over the counter, which is you come in, they give you the permit the same day. 2 is the third, or the one you don't want to get put in, is called plan review, and that's where you need full architectural plans, engineering, and you got to submit it for review of the city. That can take 8 to 10 weeks, sometimes longer, depending on if they lose it. Seattle lost all their permits not too long ago. The second one is the middle one is the seismic retro. It's called a streamline review. This is where they give you a permit in 2 weeks. So what this is you need an as-built and you need engineer to seismic retrofit your house, but they'll give you a permit in 2 weeks. So what the cost of that is, though, is usually it's going to cost you about $1,500 for an engineer, and you guys call your engineers immediately, because those guys are, we have about 15 engineers we worked with. All of them are way backed up right now. So if you have anything with engineering, call them, blow people up, call as many people as you can. If you're a client of ours, we can send you 15 to 20. We've been building ours up as well, but they're very slow, so try to push on them and call as many as you can. But the cost is about $1,500 for the engineering, and then typically, because you got to bolt down the whole house and add a bunch of fittings, it's usually about $2,000 in fittings and drilling and extra on top of my framing. Depending on who you hire as a framer, sometimes it can be up to $4,500 too, depending on how many holes you got to drill into a foundation as well. So I would say anywhere between $2,500 and $5,000, depending on the house. David asks, do I do sewer scopes? We've been trying to do sewer scopes on everything. It depends on what the situation is, whether we're writing offers and we're competing against non-contingent offers, and if there's a good enough return in the deal to have that contingency in there. But yes, right now with the market kind of settling down, it's allowed us to get more inspection timelines on there. So we're not having to waive the inspections as much. I will only waive an inspection unless I need to, because the deal's that good. Next question. Oh, there's same thing. Do you budget in sewer line replacement for homes in Seattle which are older than 50 years? We do not, unless we have a report that says we need to fix the line. So prior to closing, when you're purchasing a property, you can have it scoped and checked out. Most of the time, I'd say it's probably about 30% time the sewer line's broken or in bad shape. Another 30% of the time you're gonna have a lot of roots in there that need to be cleared out. A sewer line replacement can cost anywhere between $4,000 and $20,000, depending on whether it's in the street or not. Clearing your roots will cost you $1,000 to $2,000. So if you really want to know about that budget, I would say get an inspection, and that will tell you how much to put on your budget sheet. Another question: how do you put timeline on a project that involves a city permit? Should it start when the GC starts demo, or start when I get the city permit? That's a very good question. So again, going back to that bundling method, what I would do is I would go down and get the permits going. So in city of Seattle, though, you can go get a demo permit over the counter. They'll give you a demo permit, and during that time, you can go work on your other permits. But what I won't put my contractor on a contract or give them a down payment until I have a permit in hand. I'll hire a demo company directly and pay them, anywhere between $1,000 and 10,000, depending on what I'm demoing, and get the demo out of the way. But as far as I'm concerned, if I don't have a permit, I shouldn't be giving a contractor a down payment because they can't work anyways. So I would wait until you get that permit and then go. And if for some reason, let's say you bought a house and you got red tagged, let's say it was a 10-week project and now it's finished in 15 and you got red tagged and it cost you 3 weeks for permits, I would adjust the schedule down. They should have been, I would give them a 3-week credit and waive my penalties for 3 weeks. And you guys it depends on the situation in the house too. Like if the guy's really working hard and he's having problems with whatever inspector, because, sometimes these inspectors can be difficult, just work with your guys. But if they're not showing up and you document them not showing up, charge them the late fees. But, they should be working off the timelines on the permits, and don't give them down payments until you have that. So another question is, what is the best resource you can get money back? Oh, I think we already got that question. Sorry. Go on. One question: how different is this between building small apartments and single-family houses? How different is? So that's a very good question. So building a single-family house will take you roughly on a permit. I guess there's two questions on that. So the question is, what's the difference between building a single-family house and small apartments? So single-family house for permitting is going to take you about 5 months on a anywhere between, I'd say 3 and 5 months, depending on the city, to get your permit in hand, because you go through a design or a design review and a city review. So when you're building apartments, though, you actually have to go through neighborhood review, which adds a whole nother layer of extra permits, extra people looking at it. So your permit time, it takes about twice as long to get a permit for apartments over a single family house. That's the same for if you have a site bigger than 4 units. So if you're building, let's say, a 5-unit townhome site, it can be substantially faster by about half the amount of time to build a 4-unit site. Now, depending on the cost to build those, all I can tell you is what we build houses for in Seattle from start to finish, including all our development costs. We build them for about $185 a square foot, ranging up to $200 depending on the build. Apartments, the cost is there's a lot more variances in there. How many kitchens, how many bathrooms, whether it's being framed with wood or steel. We've had people quote us from $400 a square foot to build a wood framed structure, $350 to $400, and then anything with metal, we've had quotes up to $800 per square foot. So it can be a substantially different cost to build those items. And the reason being is you have to do sprinklers, you got to do more waste lines. You have, if you have an apartment building that's 10 studios, that's 10 kitchens and 10 bathrooms, where a house only has 4 bathrooms and 1 kitchen. So the cost can be, double or more on that. Another question, this is, being a new flipper, is there a good website that gives you typical industry costs for trades, drywall, insulation? I would say go into investor forums, and, talk to other professionals and investors. We can give you answers on that pretty quickly. So how we build all of our budget sheets, that example that I kind of went over, that has all the install rates on there. So when our clients buy a deal, we have all the install rates, which are kind of the industry standard as far as we know, that will be listed out on there. So anytime in the budget sheet, it will be flooring at $1.50 a square foot to install this kind of flooring. Or if we're doing hardwoods, it may be $3 a square foot, and that just adjusts off our budget. So if you bought a property through us, if you look at it, there's always a material, or there's a square footage, a material, and an install rate. Those install rates on your budget is what the market you should be paying them, from my opinion. Next question. Dale, are we going back to the auction soon? You might see us there soon. No promises, but you might see us there. Or there's an opening. Any more questions? we have about we got about 5 more minutes. We're actually starting about 5 minutes late. We're right at the hour mark, but I'll give you guys a couple more minutes for questions, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. And if you guys have any more questions, or you want to, feel free to email us, or if you're email your listing broker. And then also, you guys, this will be saved on our website. So if you have other investors that you want to send this out to, or you want to re-listen to it, it's all saved on our website, www.heatanddainard.com. It's in under our blog section. It'll be in there. And then our next webinar won't be this next Tuesday. It will be the following Tuesday, the 30th, excuse me. And that's where we're going to go over the next item on construction. All right. Well, since I guess we're kind of wrapping up on questions, we'll wrap it up. And again, thank you for coming out. And as questions come up, feel free to ask away, guys. We're here to help. And if you haven't came to see us, come check out our free cash flow class. If you go to heatanddainard.com, you can see when it is. It's every other Monday at our office. It really just explains on how we do things and how we operate our business. And if you're not a client, you can sign up to be a client or see if you even want to. So again, thanks for everyone to come out, and I look forward to talking to you guys.